This program was brought to you by Koller Institute of Venture at Tel Aviv University.
A couple of years ago, I took my family to north of Italy, and we went through, we actually came from Munich. We drove all the way, took the train actually, to Padua and Bologna, and as you know, this is where, the place where the universities were invented. And the idea for a university back then, 1100 something, was to do teaching. And if you fast forward 800 years, universities started to do contracted research. What we are experiencing now all over the world, and we see it very clearly at the Technion and all the universities in Israel, is the midst of the third wave where university needs to reinvent themselves. And the assumption is that universities that will be unsuccessful in this process will to some extent become irrelevant. And we are trying to fight this trend. And the wave is certainly technology transfer. So universities need to create jobs, they need to create companies, they need to demonstrate their relevance into the market in other ways other than creating mere knowledge. Now in Israel, we have been extremely successful in this. Israel has been always very successful to, as I said, reinvent itself. And this very much relies on the abilities of its academic institutions that were always ahead of the curve and were doing very innovative stuff. And the Technion, in that extent, is very telling because the leaders back then decided, for example, to build an aeronautical faculty in '51. Nobody knew if the country will survive, but nevertheless, this was the decision. And in '53, Israel Aircraft Industries, I'm not sure about the dates, but this is roughly the numbers. And today it's one of the pillars of the economy. So we have 10 companies in Israel that are selling over $1 billion, and many of them were started by the graduates and researchers from these institutions. Yesha told me basically to tell the story of technology transfer through examples, so maybe I'll skip some of the data here, and if we have time, we'll go back to it. So I'll go with this story, but just before this, I'll give you some numbers so you have some color as far as, what is this thing, technology transfer, that we talk about. So at the Technion, we start about 10 new companies every year. We license a similar number of licenses, and Yaakov Michlin is here, so I know, from my colleagues in the other universities, this is roughly the same number. So 10 new companies directly from universities' IP. We file about 80, 90 inventions, so we get about 100 invention disclosures, and we file about 80 patents, and now we have a portfolio of about 750 patents under management. So these are patents that we maintain and we try to find a good home to. Now the challenge is that patents and technology are somewhat like sugar. Yes, you cannot just ship it all over the world, you need to package it in small packages, and these packages are called companies. And fortunately, the ecosystem, as was pointed out here in Israel, is extremely and uniquely adapt to this kind of packaging and this kind of transformation from academia to the marketplace. And actually, we do it very early on, sometimes prematurely. And the result, or actually the fact that we have 4,000 companies or startup companies, is very much attributed to the fact that in many other places, these companies will be academic projects. And the issue of this kind of diversion is caused by the structure of funding, which actually kind of diverts, and forces companies or projects to be, incorporated very, very early on, very often before there is actual justification. And this also results in the fact that companies go out prematurely. They go to to kindergarten, to first grade, second grade, and then they die because the launching of these companies is done prematurely, and this is something we have to fix. So let's look at this example of Sagib and Moshe. So we have a technology by Professor Ron Kimmel, you see here in the middle. He developed a face recognition technology. This was like 15 years ago. We were struggling, we had no idea, what is the right application, and many people here discussed that we develop technologies that are looking for a problem, and this was a very typical, case in point. And we were targeting the homeland security, access control, etc. And honestly, we were failing miserably. We were not getting any traction. Nobody was interested. The false positives were too high and nobody was interested, essentially. One day, this guy, Sagi Ben Moshe, comes in, and this is the role of, and this was also discussed, the importance of these agents of the marketplace within the universities. And luckily we have them, people like Sagi. They are this conduit, they are the entrepreneurs that take this technology and actually make something out of it. And with all due respect to technology, there is no lack of technology in the world. What is lacking is innovation and entrepreneurship and willingness to take risk. So Sagi came. He came at that time, I think the university was not totally, it wasn't clearly defined what is the real model, how do we do this, what do we take, etc. But nevertheless, he persisted. He took the technology for a totally different application that we envisioned, which is hand gesturing. We didn't even know what that means. This is, the technology that you talk to computer with hand movements. The guy within less than 2 years finished a product which is essentially a chip that is embedded in your iPads, your computers, your mobile phone very soon. And basically you communicated with the devices with hand movements. Now, we did a very amazing agreement. We tried not to be greedy, so we only took 5% non-dilutive, which, Zev sits here, which is obscene in the eyes of the VCs. And on top of that, close to 10% dilutive shares. But the guy, and this is only if he raises less than $2 million. To make a long story short, he raises $1.8 million, and we sold the company to Intel for a substantial amount. But the point here is not the money. The point here is that there are 300 engineers working at Intel, worked actually because the project is done, that took this technology which otherwise would have died and actually made a product out of it to a totally different application which we did not identify. Again, the issue, building a company is like sending a spacecraft to space. Somebody has to inject that energy into the process. And if university will continue to be greedy, and will try to optimize and maximize every inch of the deal, there will be no deals. Our aim is to make as many deals as possible, not to optimize each and every deal that we do. I always say that it's a kind of a lottery business. We just have to buy many tickets, and hopefully some will win. So this is the camera as it was in 2001, 15 years ago, and this is how it is today, 15 years. This is actually our problem also with the VCs. Many people say, why don't you talk to the VCs? Why the VCs don't talk to us? They are totally not our audience. They work within a window of 5 to 7 to 8 years. They need an exit. If they don't get an exit, they don't get their next fund. We work in a window of 10 to 15 to 20 years. So there's a synchronization, major synchronization problem between us and the VCs, and that's why if we do not complete the ecosystem within the university and become more self-sufficient, we will continue to face that problem. NovoCure is another example of a professor. This is a technology to treat glioblastoma. Also took only 20 years to get it to the market. But today it's a $2.4 billion company. So we have 6 companies, if you look at the financial side, we have 6 companies that are publicly traded with a total market cap of close to $5 billion. How much is our net worth out of these companies? Almost nothing. And the reason is, because we don't have the tools to maintain any equity positions in the companies and to strengthen the financial stability of the institutions. Another example. Here we have Professor Gera Neufeld. Gera identified a gene that regulates a certain enzyme. And the assumption was that if you are able to silence that gene, you'll prevent cancer from becoming metastatic. We were spending a lot of money on this patent, and honestly, we were becoming impatient. We said, we have to stop this bleeding. We didn't have the molecule, mind you. We only have a target. There are plenty of targets. So we didn't have the molecule that does actually any work. One day, this guy, Peter Vaslaster, calls me literally out of the blue, and this comes to the issue of serendipity. Science is all about serendipity. You do something here, something else happens. Technology transfer is exactly the same. When you least expect it, somebody actually comes knocking on your door, because essentially what you do all the time, you are laying a field of mines. And you hope that somebody will stumble upon one of your mines. And this actually happened.
Metaphor is laying diamonds and opening something.
But the idea is, so the guy said, look, I stumbled upon your patent. I think I need it. Can we talk? So I said, sure, come. And, mind you, the guy is on the West Coast. He comes to me, a little country in the Middle East, because he's interested in one of our patents. We negotiated an agreement within 2 weeks. And the issue of speed here is critical because most universities are so slow because it's not clear who is taking the decision, what is the process, what are the terms that are relevant for the university. And this is very much true, especially in Europe. They have no clue. No clue. And when you try to negotiate with them, even, NDAs, CDAs, you name it, good luck. So the guy came and we literally negotiated an agreement very fast. He took a license, we took a little bit of royalties, and we forgot about it because we didn't expect anything. So and this is the difference between our ecosystem, which is good for one thing, and their ecosystem. The guy raised from Kleiner Perkin, a small several billion-dollar fund in the West Coast, and from Healthcare Ventures, a guy I used to know, Gus Lawler, and he raised only $30 million, something he could have dreamt, doing here in the Israeli ecosystem as far as biotech is concerned. He identified the molecule, finished phase 1, entered phase 2, sold the company to Gilead Sciences for $328 million. So what we see here is that innovation and collaboration, and this was also mentioned in one of the sessions here before, is becoming critical. Science is becoming global. And not only science, also innovation. A guy, actually Belgian by origin, moves to the United States, gets his education there, builds a startup, raises the money from a US VCs, gets the technology from Israel, builds a company in the United States, and sell it to a US giant. Now we have 6 products for fibrosis and cancer with Gilead Sciences, and when the company was sold, we of course got on the upfront a little bit of money, but again, the money is not the critical issue, but again, it's not the critical issue to some extent, because at the end of the day, the research budget of top institutions like the Technion net, right? $75 million. 75. If you take the research budget of this university, the Technion, the Hebrew University, the Weizmann Institute, combined together, it is less than half of the research budget of MIT, including, Lincoln Labs. So when people say, let's compare us to MIT, guys, let's compare apples to apples. There is no basis for comparison as far as funding, and if we don't capitalize on the inventions that we invent, we will cease to exist. I mean, this is imperative for the livelihood of the universities, and I think many universities don't realize this. The Technion raised in the past 10 years $1 billion from donors. Get this number, $1 billion from donors. I promise you that there will not be $1 billion going forward from the next 10 years from donors, because these donors do not exist anymore. Sorry? They pass away, yeah. I mean, the whole concept of the younger generation, and I spend a lot of time in the States trying to talk to these guys, even if they make a lot of money, they look at Israel in a very critical way. They see Israel as a very strong country, and we have to get used to the fact that we eat what we kill.
But how much research money can you generate from?
Well, look, we generate $35 million directly from royalties, and we are relatively unsuccessful. You have Yisum here that generates much more. Used to, yes, yeah, from. Look, I'm not talking about contracted research. I'm talking about direct income from equity, dividend, royalty. Look at the Weizmann Institute, a small, tiny institute. It's not a university because they don't teach undergrad. Nevertheless, they control 60% of the multiple sclerosis market with 2 drugs, Rebif and Copaxone. 60%. They accumulatively sell for over $4 billion. Hebrew University has 2 main drugs, Doxil and Exelon, exceeding $1 billion. We have Azilect, $500 million. You combine this, $7 billion just from 3 universities in Israel. The interesting number is that the actual number of drugs that we license, not that was developed here by Teva, like these drugs, that was licensed to outside giants, is selling for an equivalent of $30 billion. So if we had the industry, we would have been able to capture this value, which this wasn't done. And it's a major, major, major problem for us. Now, the fact that we cannot capitalize on it because we don't have the resources to support these initiatives and we actually sell them out is really something we'll be very sorry for. Here, Regentis, another company, and here again you see the role of the entrepreneur. Dror Selectar developed a polymer that is being polymerized in situ using ultraviolet light. So you inject it, let's say, to the knee, you put on it ultraviolet light, and voila, you have artificial cartilage, which is a huge problem. Now it's clinical trials. When we started this company at the Technion incubator, we had 60%, 60, yeah, you heard me right, 60. We now hold 1 point nothing. And the point is, again, dilution. And it's not that you have tens of millions of dollars going into this company. It's maybe 10 million. And the fact that the universities do not have any tool, because, God forbid, let's not talk money. Money is for the bad, financial people. We are a university. The fact that we didn't have